I am far from a perfect raider, and anyone who claims to be one is rejecting reality and making it that much harder for them to improve. Still, I believe I'm decent enough to offer some advice for those on the path of improvement. When I first began raiding in Stormblood, I couldn't even clear any of the raid teams. I only ever managed to clear Halicarnassus once, and all attempts to re-clear ended up wiping at Farmville. Or healing up White Hole was a skill I could only dream of achieving. During Shadowbringers, however, I began to work on improving, and I think I did a pretty good job of it. I not only cleared every Savage fight, I also completed T that same expansion. Granted, we had the slightly upgraded dungeon gear when I got around to it in patch 5.3. Running dungeons for gear is awful, and in Endwalker, Dragonsong was completed on patch. Omega was a bunch of memes, so it didn't get finished before 6.4, but hopefully before 7.0. My experiences aside, my previous guide examined improving one's controller use, and I am so grateful for the support that video got. I'll put an info card for that here in case you haven't looked at it, but a couple of things there are universal. And now, we can go further beyond and become true masters of hitting bosses and avoiding lightning. Thus, I've compiled a small list of things to that end. Some of these are no-brainers, but even the basics are required to emphasize their importance. These include no one is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. You and I are no exception. But your highs being high doesn't matter when your lows are low. Sure, you may have a couple pulls where you pop off and feel like a god, but it's moot if you end up wiping in the end. Therefore, the best thing you can do is to limit those bad plays that cause bad runs, and the best way to do that is getting better at raiding. Obvious, right? So here are some things that helped me. Improving your gameplay starts before you even boot up the game. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty here. Maybe in a video where I talk about mods. Anyway, for now, all that matters is that our brains only have so much processing power, and so when we don't sleep, or don't sleep enough, the body just works slower. And a slower brain means lower reactions, thoughts, and overall worse play. Training dummies are fantastic for getting comfortable with your rotation, getting your ABCs down, and making damage dealing second nature. Though the Stone Sky Seat can be just as valuable. Often overlooked as an improvement tool, this gives you a 3-minute timer to drop the dummy to 0 HP, and is tuned for the DPS checks of a specific fight you choose. Of course, there's a difference between hitting a training dummy and having to do that while dealing with mechanics. But if you can take up the dummy and do your rotation without having to spend too many brain cells on it, doing damage while in a raid becomes significantly easier, which leads us to the next point. While I will always be an advocate for doing fights blind, watching a guide has very obvious benefits. They are useful for newer players so they can focus on what matters instead of what doesn't, and it also makes it easier to use Party Finder to have everyone on the same page. Small tangent, but there were multiple ways to solve Light Rampant, and the horrors of PF needing to find groups that did it the way you knew or liked. Thankfully, Crystal eventually came around to the better strat, unlike Aether, who stayed with Ilia the entire time. But the point is, some players are going to treat guide strats as gospel without going in to understand why those strats work. This causes problems when things go wrong, and quick adjustments need to be made. This links to the previous and the next point. Sometimes the best option in a fight is to fall on your sword. Unless the point of the party is to get good parses. Not a thing I personally care about. Making sure the boss dies and everyone gets the loot in as few pulls as possible is key. If stuff starts going wrong, be flexible enough to adjust what you're doing. Holding raid buffs, casting extra heals or reses to salvage a pull. Even sacrificing yourself to keep a run going will be a huge blessing. Sure, not every run can be saved, and people should avoid extra damage. But what's worse, having to cast Cure 2 a couple times or losing 5+ minutes of your life because you want to send a message. My logs suck, but I know an Eden 10 Savage for example. If I saw people in the wrong spot, or even if I got confused which group I was in for the orbs, I would just stand in the center and eat all of them and get rezzed after. My weakness made the boss fight 30 or 40 seconds longer, but I'd rather that than reset the whole fight. Though this can be a bit taxing, be able to think ahead. Obviously, you aren't expected to map out your movements from pull to loot, but using Omega as an example, while I'm waiting for each number to go off, I'm looking at what to do next.
Killer Queen 第3の爆弾バイツァーダスト
As program loop casts, I look for the 2 people I adjust for to see if we share a number. Since I don't share a number with them, I'm clockwise for everything. Once Blaster begins casting and the tethers go out, I look for the safe spots, which for this is north or east. After the first blast, I know that I am clockwise, so I'm in the south tower. And having gone east, I'm pre-positioned for this possibility. When the third set of towers spawn, I find a safe spot, either east or west. While I'm waiting, I'm staring at the clockwise tether, and because I know that north and south have had both towers spawn, I'm taking the tether east after I grab it. If you're not hitting 95s or better in random clear parties, don't worry. Without specifically aiming for them, higher percentiles is a roll of the die, since kill time plays a huge part, as does padding. Things like healers slacking on healing, letting people die, or forcing the other healer to handle everything, manipulating the kill time so that the boss dies during or right after a burst window. Crit variance can also just give you bigger numbers. While obviously dealing more damage is better than doing less damage, but as long as your numbers generally go up compared to older clears, you're improving. FF Logs doesn't break up people by gear level either, so especially early on, if someone just gets fed all of the gear, it makes it way easier for them to get better scores. Okay, so this is kind of a lie, but let me explain. When people usually say greed, they mean cutting it really close. Like standing in an AoE to slide cast out of the way because you might get clipped. So a newer player might through instinct or instruction see danger puddles and get out of the way as fast as possible. Though as our precious little sprouts grow up, they will become safe players who never experiment or rebellious teens. The safe content respecters are going to avoid any and all damage, even if it doesn't do any noticeable damage, which in this game is basically anything that doesn't instantly kill you or give you damage down. On the other hand, the rebels are just going to get hit by everything without really any thought. This is great because you will get punished often. Though, if we never get punished, is it really greed? Pro tip, it is not. Because fights are on a timeline, they are very reliable, so if you find out what you can and cannot get away with, you can squeeze out a little bit of extra damage that some players will think is risky, but if you're consistent, you'll never get hit, thus not greed. Though, since this can lead to failed experiments, try not to greed from clear parties. A nice thing to note, especially for casters, is that your hurt box isn't really a box, but a very, very small bit in the center of your target ring. When you get a feel for this, your model can be safely touching AoE, but the game doesn't care. Being good at this makes dancing between overlapping but alternating AoEs super simple, so even before Endwalker changing healer GCDs to all be fast, some things could just be slid cast through without dropping any uptime. This topic can be applied to like all party combat content and not just the endgame. Just because melee LB makes the biggest number appear doesn't mean the other roles should avoid the button. In dungeons, most of the melee LB2 damage gets wasted because the boss is going to get super overkilled by the time you charge it up. So ranged and casters should be looking for packs to use LB1 on. Though it's not necessarily required, it is a small time save. As long as you're hitting at least 4 or 5 targets for caster and range respectively, these LB1s will be more valuable than a melee LB2. Speaking of dungeons, using raid buffs and mid on trash packs is more valuable than waiting to do your normal opener on bosses. Okay, now back to limit breaks. When talking about support LBs, they can sometimes be a run saver. Of course this is going to be situational, but a healer resing even 2 or 3 people, especially if it's a DPS, is going to be way more damage for the party. This is because they are brought back without weakness or progress to brink of death, which is a 25 or 50% damage down for almost 2 minutes. But also full mana, so casters can start blasting immediately. But healer LB has a long animation lock, so if a tank spots that the party isn't going to survive incoming damage, they can just press the button to try and prevent people from dying. And what's the worst that happens? It's not enough mitigation to keep everyone alive and you wipe. You are going to die regardless and lose the LB. Or you overmit some damage, but DPS checks are fairly lenient unless you're doing content minimum item level or ultimate. Or maybe you just use one of these buttons to just avoid doing a hard mechanic properly. They are valuable tools in the group's arsenal that shouldn't be mocked for being used. There are a lot of really basic tips, like weaving properly in ABC, and there are better videos out there for that, so I was hoping to go one step deeper with this. And I'm positive there are other things out there that I forgot about, or didn't realize would be a helpful tip. So let me know your thoughts, anything you know that I missed, or any questions.